Well, it's wonderful to see everybody this morning.
Good to see you too.
Yes.
So, how was Carnegie Hall?
Carnegie Hall was wonderful. It was so the interesting thing about Carnegie Hall is they do not have any microphones in Carnegie Hall. There's no, it's all acoustics. So, and it's actually, if you look at the hall, it's shaped and sort of in the shape of a cello. So the interesting thing about that is the art guy who designed it was a cellist, and so Andrew Carnegie had commissioned this guy to do this.
Yeah, finance and those people to do it.
Yeah. Well, so the interesting thing about Carnegie Hall was it was built on Goat Hill. That was the name of the place it was built on.
Guilt.
Goat.
A goat.
Goat Hill. So,
In New
so,
York.
so yeah. So, and nobody when he started making this was like, we are not coming out to the suburbs to go listen to a music performance.
There's a seat right next to
Jane.
Pastor.
I think
Hey, Pastor.
How's it going, Jay? So yeah. So there was a so no one wanted to come out. And so you know where Carnegie Hall is. It's in the middle of Lower Manhattan. So it's like, it's not in the suburbs by any stretch. But at that particular point in time when it was built, it was in the suburbs. And so the way that Carnegie got people to come to the first concert was he had a very famous conductor, Tchaikovsky. The guy who did the 1812 Overture. He was the first person there. And so everybody came to do that. They had the wagons or the carts were lined up for a quarter of a mile to get into Carnegie Hall. That's how much people wanted to go there. And one of the other things I thought was interesting, in honor of their heritage, all the seats coverings are made out of mohair. So goat hair, basically. In honor of Goat Hill, which is where Carnegie Hall was made. So I thought that was very interesting.
because I think John Rockefeller started a bunch of libraries.
Yep, he did too. He was very much about libraries and the arts. He very much was into that. So that's some information about Carnegie Hall, more than you probably wanted to know.
That's interesting.
How did the concert go?
It was really good. I didn't like the seats, not because you couldn't hear them, but I am very particular about what seats I pick when I go to an event like that. I like aisle seats, and they had me in the middle of all these people, and I'm like, I do not like that. So the performance was great. I really loved the performance. Evelyn did a great job. So for the performance that we had, it was an orchestra, and then her choir, which was an all-girl choir, and then the choir after that which was a boy and girl choir. And all the performances were really good. And so yeah, it was a lot of fun to listen to that. And it was really interesting. You could hear the real good blending of the people singing and the instruments and stuff like that. It was really fun. She had a great time. So yeah, it was that was a lot of fun. So I'll give you a couple stories because I'm going to do a couple on Sunday too. Let's see. So I'll just do two. The first one. So we went to we had a walking tour of Lower Manhattan. So we started at the Staten Island Ferry and worked our way back to the 9/11 Museum. And that was really interesting because, just coming into Lower Manhattan, we have too much sunlight here for Lower Manhattan because the buildings are so big on each side. It's so cramped. Everything's mostly one-ways. And so you have people, lining, the cars are just lining the streets. And so you have like one or two lanes of traffic. And it's always one way. Yeah.
You made the thing. Horrible.
Yeah, it's,
Just packed everything.
yeah. Everything's packed. And so like I said, don't look for trash cans on the street either, too. They just pile their garbage bags on the sidewalk.
Oh, gee. Like
So-
Lima.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like Lima.
Yeah, so the garbage guys come. The garbage is always being picked up. So I mean they have these like 10 to 20 bags of garbage
Oh, wow.
just right on the street corner, and people they get rid. You know, you go by the next day and they're all gone. So
When my nephew was in New York, or Brooklyn, I guess it was, when he was preaching or pastor there for a while, and they would dump their garbage if there was a car sitting there that didn't look like it was running. They just walk by and dump their garbage in there. So here's this convertible. He said, just
Oh.
yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't care.
No. No, so you had all your, so you had that, and then like I said, it's just you had these. So think of it sort of like a tunnel, because you have these huge buildings that are at least 15 to 20 stories on either side of you, and so it creates a pretty big size, like wind tunnels. Like when the wind's blowing, it's pretty. It blows a lot. The other thing you do is you love the language that the cars speak. There was always somebody honking. Never failed. And it wasn't always like, it was more like them letting each other know where they were at. So you'd hear like one honk, then you hear another honk, then you hear another honk. We had one day where we were just sitting up in the room, and it was really funny because we hear all this, all these high pitched honk, 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 and all of a sudden you hear this one low pitched honk that goes honk, and we just were dying. We were just laughing because it was just so funny. But yeah, so I mean there was that.
Did you rent a car?
No, we walked everywhere.
Gary, you're funny.
Yes, yeah. I was like, there's
I got so
exactly.
crazy. People are crazy out there. They don't believe in lights. Green,
No.
red,
Absolutely,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah. It's very.
Yeah. So yeah, it was. So that was. So those are some initial impressions. I mean, everybody's walking too. Everybody's walking with a purpose. It's not like people here. You might be walking around, get some exercise. People are there. We're going point A to point B. Don't get in my way. Point A, point B.
So there is people like they're selling something in the street like hot dogs or tacos or whatever it is like that.
Yeah, they do have shops that they have like
vendors.
street vendors that you can do. The people there's people that were selling hats, and then there was a lot of food vendors that you could go around.
Well, they don't have grocery stores. Really?
Well, yes and no. I mean, like where we're at, there was a cafe that was called Studio or Cafe 53, and they had a lot of groceries you could get. But I mean, most of it was prepackaged stuff. But they did have they had like a lot of fresh ingredients though. So they had like a nice sort of fruit bar. They charge you $12.99 per pound for the fruit, but
Oh, we don't pay that much out there.
I
In the
know,
hallway.
I know. Exactly.
Pretty cheap in the hallway,
It's
isn't it?
pretty cheap. So yeah, so there was that.
Well, you were going to tell the story about how you almost paid for the.
Yes. All right. So that was one of the two stories. So I'll give you the first story here. So we were at the 9/11 museum, and so I texted your son while I was there because they had this. So part of the memorial was they have this fire truck, and you can see the fire truck has just been really demolished. And on the back of the fire truck, it has a name on it, Jeff. And I was
Jeff.
I gotta take a picture of that and send that to Jeff. So I did. So we got through. I mean, so the interesting thing about the museum is you go down. It's not like you go around. Like like a lot of museums, you start on the ground floor and you work your way around. No, you go down. And I mean, this is way deep. I mean, you're going down below the ground. I mean, you go way down. I mean, you really go far down into
Sounds
the.
like you didn't like that.
Well, it was fine.
Yeah,
But
I
it-
can see it.
but it's just sort of that. It's just interesting that because I think like when I go to most museums here, they have like a ground floor, they have a whole bunch of stuff you can sort of see, but like there, you really were. I think what it really does is give you the scale.
Yeah.
This was in the
Yeah.
actual hole of the building?
Yeah,
Really?
this was
Okay.
so it was pretty deep. So we had a great time at the memorial. You could easily spend 3 to 4 hours there. We were only there for about an hour because we had to get back. So we stopped at the gift shop. And Harry wanted to buy a sweatshirt. I'm like, okay. So he's got this one that says, love is stronger than hate. Perfect, great. So they go to ring it up. $311,000. And I look at the guy, he looks at me, and I'm like, that's not the price, is it? He says, well, that's what it rang up. And the guy next to him goes, let's put that in manually. Puts it in manually. $311,000. And he's like, I think we got to call the manager. I said, yeah, that's pretty spendy. I didn't know we're paying for the memorial just with the sweatshirt. I said, it's a nice sweatshirt.
Store.
Yeah, I know. I could have bought the store for that. So then they get the manager down, and she's like, oh, no, just type it in manually. He's like, I typed it in manually. She's like, really? He's like, yeah, that's the price. They said, well, it's got to be something wrong with the SKU. So she called it back up to the floor, and then took about 2 to 3 minutes, and finally $50 came up for the price tag of the sweatshirt. I said, that's a lot more affordable. So $311,000 and $11. I forgot to throw in the $11 piece.
That price I can buy a house.
Exactly. Yeah, so that was we everybody joked. We're like, we know the prices in New York are expensive, but not much. And the second story actually happened after we got done with New York. So there's only one flight a day from Minneapolis to JFK, a direct flight, and so all the rest of the flights you had to go through Atlanta and go back. So you flew from JFK to Atlanta, and then you flew to Atlanta from Minneapolis, and we're on the last flight because, of course, I looked at the schedule of events. There was something planned for that morning, and I was like, okay, so, because everyone's like, well, I really want to do whatever. She wanted to get the full experience. I'm like, okay, so fine. So we found out that the thing that they did on Sunday morning, which is the day we were leaving, was like, well, you just need to say goodbye to your chaperone. I'm like, really? We could have left like 3 hours. We could have been home a lot earlier. But so when we got to JFK, which was really pretty quick, so we left the Sheraton at 10:35, and we were sitting at our gate at 12:30. So that's pretty good, going from Lower Manhattan all the way out to the airport, going through security, getting our bags checked, getting to the gate, 2 hours. That was pretty good.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, it was really good. So we got to there, and I went up to the Delta counter, and it was like, so this is a pretty tight connection that we have. It's 50 minutes. I'm like, it's 50 minutes. I'm like, I said, is there any way that we can get out any earlier, to take this later flight? And she's like, well, no, you pick this. I was like, well, this was my choice. She's like, yeah, it was your choice. You picked this. I said, this was the times that you guys said I could go from here to point A to point B. But, sir, you really picked this. I was like,
no.
I said, okay. She's like, you should have plenty of time when you get there. Okay. So we're at JFK, and they go like, well, we need 15 volunteers to get off the plane because we have 15 people that need to get to Atlanta for a transfer. And I'm like, they were offering $1,500 a ticket, plus a free ticket from LaGuardia to wherever you wanted to go. And I said, no. I said, Britta's like, she's looking at me like, we are not doing that. She says, I need to be at work tomorrow. I'm like, okay, that's fine. It's $1,500. It's so she's like,
how far away is LaGuardia?
well, they would have taken you too, but we would have missed our connection. We would have to have stayed over in Atlanta. So I was like, all right, so.
But that's why they sweeten the pot, because people don't want to do it.
Exactly. So we finally get on the plane, and then they're like, well, yeah, we're still waiting for our passengers. I'm like, dude, 50 minutes. That's all I got. And they're like, oh, it shouldn't really add too much time to when we get there. I'm like, okay. So we get there. We get in so our plane leaves at 8:32 or 8:22, and we get in at 7:40. So I'm like, okay. And so we get off the plane. And, of course, we're sitting in the back, because that's where I always like to sit. So we're sitting in the back, and yeah, everybody's taking their sweet time getting up and out. And I'm like, really? Really? So we get off the plane, and we're at E26, so all the way down this terminal end. and we look,
It's always so.
and we look, and it's like B1 is we're ready to go. I'm like, seriously, we're in E. I got to get all the way down to B, and I only got like 20 minutes. We started running. So we got to so we had to run all the way up to the gates. So of course,
Well,
we're
you
at,
should have told him to hold that plane for you because you were holding for one passenger for that plane.
exactly.
Or maybe you can explain like I did one day. I had only 25 minutes for
Yeah.
my next flight. Yeah, I was pretty much in the back. I said, I say, I need I got a connection in 20 minutes.
We should have did that.
They were waiting for me. I mean, run like.
Well, that's what we were doing. We ran. So me and Harry took off running. We got down to the shuttle that they had, and the shuttle's actually fairly fast. So we get to B. It's only been like 6 minutes, and I'm like, okay, good. So we get off B, and it drops you off, and it says 1 to 18 is this way. I'm like, oh, good. So we should be right at the
Other end.
I was thinking, well, maybe it'll drop us right in the middle at 9. Oh no, we're at 18. I'm like, seriously? I'm like, why do you have us at B1? We're going to Minneapolis. We're not going to some podunk town. Why are we at B1? So me and Harry are just still running. And we get there and they're boarding, and I'm like, okay. And then they're like, well, we're just boarding first class. I'm like, okay, well, that's good. Well, 20 minutes later, then they called for us. Oh, yeah, no, you can board now, too. I'm like, really? I didn't have to run.
But you
So,
made it.
we made it. We made it to that.
You
Now-
were thriving.
yes, we were thriving. Yes.
Never catch up.
Because I'd
Yeah.
like to rather wait.
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
left
Said
it behind.
run.
Yeah, well, they came. Well, because we were going to just say, we were just
Hold
sit at
the
the gate.
airplane.
Right, we we're going to hold the
Yeah.
airplane. And Britta gets on the plane. She says, there's no way our luggage is going to make it. And then the captain comes on 5 minutes later and goes, we're just waiting for all the luggage to come on right now. So, and we got to the gate at Minneapolis, or the baggage claim. Who were the first 3 bags that came out? Was our bags, because we were the last 3 bags on there.
So that was good.
Yeah. So,
It was nice happening.
yeah. So,
I know. I've been to MSB and waited. And
Oh, yeah.
Waited and waited.
yeah. Yeah.
I
That's
looked at all the
so many
bags
stories
coming
from
down.
my
It was my.
flight when to go to Lima. I have to take a little train, then I have to go out there. Then I say, oh.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the reason when I try to buy my airplane tickets, I need to sit on the computer or my phone for 30 minutes. No, what time is coming? No, 40 minutes. Oh, is something happy? The weather? No, it's maybe. Yeah.
Exactly.
So,
You got-
especially in winter time, because you don't know how the weather is in Minneapolis, so you have a delay. Yeah. Sometimes I have to buy my airplane ticket when I arrive, suppose at 8 in the morning in Houston, in my next place, 3 o'clock.
Yeah.
That huge, because I know sometimes the weather is bad. No, we're leaving in 2 hours. No, in 3 hours.
No.
Yeah.
2000. I was driving that big truck and going in New Jersey and all that area.
Troy
Yeah.
flew
You could
to
see Newark Airport where I had to go.
I
Troy
know.
flew to Iowa yesterday. It was 40 minutes from Eau Claire to wherever he was in Iowa.
He went
Ken-
to out of Eau
Ken's-
Claire?
He left Eau Claire. It was one of the, what do you call these little jets?
All those little puddle jumpers.
Yeah. He said he sat in the front seat coming when they left. And when they take off like this. He said, I would have, if I hadn't been belted in the seat, I would have been back there. Because he was straight up. But he liked it, yeah.
I would not be on that.
Just like flying into San Diego because there's tall buildings. All of a
Oh, yeah.
sudden, they just drop.
Yeah, they just drop you quick.
They don't want to drop on the Marines.
Or the Navy.
Well, thank you for letting me share those little things with you. So,
Can I share a little thing?
yeah, yeah.
You were playing with your sock when, when you were talking. The pastor from First Reform brought the services to the care center Sunday, and he was showing somebody back his socks. He lifted up his pants and his socks. He had Spider-Man socks on. But anyway, when he got to Ken, Ken said, "When did you lose your leg?" He looked at me. I said, no, he was showing his socks. I got the wrong gist of the story.
Just like,
But he said a lot of people like ties, like Don does, with different things on. But he say I like socks that are different.
Absolutely.
Thematic socks.
just like
The
your son lives in Scottsdale. And then had a layover in Memphis.
Mm-hmm.
Then had to go to Atlanta and go to Scottsdale. I said, you go east to go west.
Exactly. We
east
go
to
south
west.
to go north. Well, for today, we are in Matthew still. We are in, we're going to talk about some parables. So when you hear the word parable, what does that mean to you? Story. Okay. With the meaning. So why do you think Jesus used parables?
That's the way he taught.
Yeah, but why did he teach like that?
He thought
You
it'd be easier
remember?
for them to understand, but I'm not sure if it
I
was.
don't think it was either.
That's what I'm thinking, because I'm looking at some of these stories, I'm like,
What?
what? What are you trying to get at, Jesus? It's interesting that Jesus teaches with parables like that, because it's for our modern minds, what are we always liking as people? We want yes or no answers, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're always about, yes or no. Yep, it's either this or this.
Just the facts, man.
Yes, just the
That's
facts. That's all we want. But these parables that Jesus talks us to about is not like that at all. There's a lot of something that we do not like.
Gray areas.
Exactly. Ambiguity.
Room for interpretation.
Room for interpretation. And the parables that we're going to read today there's been a lot of interpretation of these parables. And we also see something interesting today in that Jesus actually does what in one of the parables?
He explains it.
He explains it. Jesus normally doesn't explain what he's talking about, which I don't know about you is very frustrating. Like, Jesus, just tell me what you want me to do. But again, I go back to that. Why do you think Jesus doesn't do that?
One of the thoughts I've had is that people who heard him, if they were serious about trying to understand it, they would spend time thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas they didn't really care, they don't understand it, I just
Yep.
wouldn't even spend time thinking about it.
I think you're right there, Don. I think, yeah, like I said, I think it's a lot of that is inviting us to think more deeply about what Jesus is actually talking about, and to mull it over. And we also know that the Bible is the living Word of God. So when we read these parables today, you might not have the same experience reading these parables a week from now, a month from now, a year from now. It's really about where we're at and where you're at. And so I think that's another thing that the reason Jesus tells these stories is because he knows one size doesn't fit all. So in some sense, it's really pretty neat that Jesus does this. But there's also a biblical mandate for this. And Don, do you know the verse that I'm talking about? So it actually comes out of Psalms, if I remember the right song. I think it was 78:2, but I could be wrong. But there's in the Psalms there's a passage that talks about how God talks in parables. So this is not something that's
Fulfill prophecy.
right. So Jesus in some sense is fulfilling prophecy when it comes to that. Don't quote me on 78:2, but
It is,
it is?
yeah.
Woohoo! I got something right today. Yay!
I did, when I read it,
Read that part?
it says it's cited from Psalm 78:2, verse 35.
There you go. So yeah, so like I said, so there is some biblical mandate. So when Jesus speaks in parables, it's not something he's just making up off the top of his head from that perspective, that he's doing something that has been mandated in the Bible he's following me through on that, doing the prophecies and stuff like that. So, so that's something interesting about parables. So as we think about parables for today, I want you just to basically know, I have no idea what Jesus really meant by each of these parables. I have no idea. You'd probably have to wait till you get to heaven and ask Jesus, and he'll probably say, so what do you think? Because that's basically at the end of that, we'll probably, there's some similarities between two of the parables that we're going to talk about today. And then when we get done reading the parables too, I'll ask you, which parable do you like the most out of these three? There's a lot of them. I actually have a book by, I took a class on parables. And I think we actually did an adult forum one time too on that too. So if you want to read more about parables, Arlen Huntgren is a book I have. He's an author that I have, and he does the parables of Jesus. Really, he was one of my seminary professors, really bright guy. A lot of good stuff. So if you want to read more about parables, let me know. I'll be happy to loan you the book. So, well, let's get into the text for today. All right, and we are in Matthew what, 23?
13.
13. I was trying to get ahead of myself.
One on the other right.
All right. All right, so... Okay, so we start in 24 and we go to 43. Okay, so who wants to read the first 5? 24 through 29.
Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. But at that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in a bundle to be burned. Then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn."
All right, 31 to 35.
I can read it. He put before them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed that someone took and sowed in his field. It is the smallest of all the seeds, but when it has grown, it is the greatest of shrubs and becomes a tree, so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like yeast that a woman took and mixed in with 3 measures of flour until all of it was leavened. Jesus told the crowds all these things in parables. Without a parable, he told them nothing. This was to fill what had been spoken through the prophet. "I will open my mouth to speak in parables. I will proclaim what has been hidden from the foundation of the world."
And how about just 36 through the end of it?
Then he left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples came to him and said, "Explain to us the parable of the tares of the field." And he said, "The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, and the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom, and the tares are the sons of the evil one. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. So just as the tares are gathered up and burned with fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send forth his angels, and they will gather out of his kingdom all stumbling blocks, and those who commit lawlessness, and will throw them into the furnace of fire. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Then the righteous will shine forth as the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear."
All right.
That 3 measures of flour, mine says 60 pounds.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
60 pounds.
That's a lot of flour.
That's a lot of flour. So which of these parables was your favorite? And tell me why.
Excuse me.
Okay.
Well, it seems like when you plant something, yeah, the weeds are planted too, right, Evan?
And a lot of times there's more weeds than crop.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
I always like the little mustard seed. For the little guy.
I'm wondering what this lady did with the flour.
Yeah. Yeah. What did she do with all that flour?
She fed the hungry.
There you go.
Good girl.
So it's always interesting too as you look at these stories.
Sorry.
What is sort of the commonality of each of the parables, each of these stories that Jesus is telling us? What's sort of the commonality?
The kingdom of heaven.
The kingdom of
Kingdom
heaven,
of God.
Yeah.
kingdom of God is like. So that's interesting. Now some of these parables do show up in the other synoptic gospels, so Mark and Luke, but not all of them. You know, some of them, and they are not all the same. See, there you go.
Oh, my. Oh, wow.
Anybody wants a copy of that, I could.
What is it?
A list of all the parables.
Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, which
oh,
gospel?
yeah.
Which gospels? Yep. So yeah, so and like I said, just because they're in the same gospel too, they're not always referred to in the same light. Like when we look at the parable of the yeast, a woman is not named in that. In Matthew, he names a woman took and mixed it with 3 measures of flour. In the Luke version, they don't mention a woman.
Well, who else would do it?
Yeah, you're not going to see the man making.
Yeah.
True. But it's interesting that Matthew puts that in there to make sure that you know who did that. So, so what do you think Jesus is getting at when he's teaching about these parables? What's the kingdom of God like? You have 3 examples.
Yeah, good and bad living together.
Good and bad living together. Good and bad what?
People.
Okay. Now, this particular one, the first one, has been used to identify who the good people are and the bad people are in many different times. Some people during the Reformation would say the good people would be the Reformers, or if you were on the Catholic side, the good people would be the Catholics. So you see that within the church. So this parable has many times meant for in the church community. You have people in your own church that are the good people, and you have people that go to your church that are the bad people. That has been one way to frame this. Another way to frame this is that it talks about ourselves, that we are as Lutherans, we always think of ourselves as saint and sinners. So there are grain and weeds within each of us. And so that's another way to look at this text, an interpretation of the text, to look at us and say, okay, so that at the end of time, that the weeds that are inside of you will be taken away, and you'll have that clean spirit within you, the wheat, which will go up with you to heaven.
I like that.
I do too.
So that is one example. So these are, so like I said, so you see in the ambiguity in here. So you can attach a lot. So even when Jesus explains this, though, he's very ambiguous with the explanation. He says, well, this means this, and this means this. But it's sort of saying, well, yep, that car's blue. That one's yellow. There's a lot of shades of yellow. There's a lot of shades of blue. You know, you're not really helping here, Jesus. You're not really telling us what's going on. So I want you to think about that as, so even when he explains the parables, he's still is being a little coy. You say, well, yeah, this is this and this is that. And still, yet, you can have these different explanations. So you often wonder why people are like, thanks, Jesus. You know, you answer a question with a question. So he's very famous for doing that. So Karen, let's talk about your favorite parable.
The little mustard seed.
Yeah. So what do you think it means?
You can be the smallest little stone in the water and make a big ripple if you.
I like that. See, there you go. I like that. Does any of this imagery also, this imagery that we see here, is there any other stories that remind you of this type of imagery? Any other stories that you've heard?
The only story I have is my grandfather telling us he's going to bring us some wonderful place, and he brings us out to the field to pull mustard.
Your grandfather.
Yes.
I can see why that's a good story for you. So
He was a good storyteller. He's the one that always shot the Easter bunny.
You know what's funny? That somebody ran over a rabbit on Easter. And the other time, somebody put some black eggs around it.
But it just reminds me of the little mustard seed and how it took over like field if you let it eat.
Well, yeah, but the mustard seed over there was a tree, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and,
it was.
And they were big, strong trees.
well, so me and John had a debate about this.
Oh,
So
okay.
he was saying there's just like a shrubbery.
Yeah, it's not a regular tree, but it's a
It's not a weed.
It's not a weed.
yeah, it's strong.
Arborvitae.
But
It's like our arborvitae. It's a shrub, but it's a big shrub.
Let it grow.
so many times the story gets compared to so Jesus is using this also to sort of give us sort of an allegory. Who do you think the birds are? What are the birds?
People of the kingdom.
Could be.
The birds are the ones that come and snatch all the little seeds, right?
No, they come in and make
And to
nests.
make nests and
Nest in the
rest.
branches.
Shelter
Oh,
branches.
the shelter.
So
I'm
if
thinking of a different one where I think he just throws it out. The
Yeah,
seeds
no,
on the
there's-
ground.
yeah.
And the birds come pick it
Yeah,
up.
that
So,
that was before this one.
okay.
So
Because then I would say it would be, the birds are all the different temptations
okay.
in that story, but this one I don't know.
Well, if they're coming to rest and shelter, they would be us,
Okay.
maybe?
Yeah.
Rest and shelter.
One of the ways I've seen it is the shrub is the church. It had very small beginnings,
Mm-hmm.
but it's grown immensely, and we can come for our shelter and nesting within the church.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the other interpretations of this is the birds of the air represent kingdoms. They represent nations. And back in the book of Daniel, there was Nebuchadnezzar sort of made this statement. If you remember Nebuchadnezzar, he wasn't a very good king to the people of. He was the Babylonian king. Aha. Two things I remember today. Man, I'm on a roll. But so he had made a comparison between his kingdom and a tree, where the nations of the world would come because of Nebuchadnezzar, because of Babylon. They were coming. He was the tree that was sort of protecting everybody, and this could be potentially be a jab from Jesus saying, hey, you remember this story from Nebuchadnezzar? He said he was really the tree that would provide for the nations. Well, guess what? No, it's the kingdom of heaven, and so there could be a little bit of that as well too. So as we think about these different parables, again, anything else that really sticks out to you? Anything that you think is interesting, or do you find them helpful? Do you find them
I can tell you
comforting?
what I don't like.
Okay, tell me what you don't
When
like.
they take all the weeds and they throw them into the fire and have the gnashing of teeth. I don't like that part.
Tell me why you don't like that part.
Because I think of loved ones that have gone astray and I don't want them seeing in the fire and gnashing of teeth.
So one way I always ask people is, I think the people that we would find there, let's see, how do I put that? I think when we think of, okay, this person is going to be there, this person is going to be there, it reflects back on who we see God as. So when we think of people who we think are going to be there, we often get a sense of who we think God is. But I will push back on that, because how does God do when God's put in a box? God doesn't do very well with that. God always seems to be overflowing out of our boxes. One of the reasons why I tell you every Sunday when we leave this place that you're going to see God, because God's just not in the sanctuary. He's like Elvis. He's left the sanctuary.
Left the building.
He's left the building. So I always would tell people, I think the biggest thing out of this is my interpretation would be, how grace-filled do we see God? And at the end of the day, as much as we would want to judge somebody to say, well, no, they're going to be in the fire, we don't get to make that judgment at the end of the day. Because as we can see, they let the servants just collect, or the reapers. So that's not even the people. The slaves, the people who planted the stuff, don't collect it. It's the reapers, which is angels. You can make that interpretation as angels. They collect the weeds first and then bind them in bundles to be burned. And like I said, you can look at that weeds in a whole different sort of thing. We could look at the weeds from the perspective that means all those bad things within us. Or what happens if we're the weeds? But then don't we also, because this also doesn't talk about any type of grace. They bundle them together to be burned, but that doesn't mean that you can't take, there's an extra piece of grain in the weed bundle you can pull out. It doesn't say that they go through there's a lot of stuff that's, again, ambiguous. Stuff that we don't know. That Jesus is telling the story. But I think at the end of the day, it really invites us to say, God gets to judge at the end of time. As much as we like to, because we're really good at it. Don't you think? I think we're pretty good at judging stuff.
To log out of our own eyes.
Yeah. Exactly. So when we hear stuff like this, I would invite you to think about, well, God is going to be the one that makes that final judgment. And the other thing, again, my perspective, just pointing that out there, when do you think God stops coming to us?
He doesn't.
Yeah. I always say God. So even, let's say you were the worst person in the world, you die, and you're at that time, you see Jesus, and Jesus says, well, do you want to do this? You want to go up to heaven, or you want to not do this? I believe even at that point in death, God is not saying, oh yeah, you died, I'm just done with you. I think God is continuously, always inviting us into a relationship with God. I don't think there's a place that God is not at.
Almost giving you a second chance, in other words, right?
Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 20,000th,
Can't
300,
hear me now.
300,000.
311,000.
There we go. There we go.
And $11.
And $11. So, yeah, I don't think you never read in the Bible there's a cap on grace. You know, Jesus, when they said, well, how many times do we need to forgive? Jesus says 77. Meaning those at that particular point was 7 times, 77 times, meaning forever. You always. And if Jesus is saying this, what does God do? And so I would invite us to look at texts like this and say, so God is judging, and at the same time, we are constantly being invited into that relationship with God. God will judge us for what we've done, because we all know we are saint and sinner. There are weeds within each of us, and yet God still loves us. God still calls us to relationship, us imperfect people. And as we look at that, so it's interesting that Jesus starts with that text, but then what are the next 2 parables about? Think of it in terms of imperfect people. So we are imperfect people. And yet, what are the 2 next parables about the kingdom of heaven about? With these imperfect people that God is charged to help lead God's church. Karen, your favorite
You're
one?
talking about the little mustard seed.
Little mustard
and
seed?
then the yeast.
Yeah, so what happened with the mustard seed?
Little grows.
Yeah, grows real big. Real big. Takes over the whole farm field.
That's right.
And then what happens with how much flour?
60 pounds.
60 pounds of flour. Imperfect people. People who have weeds in them. And the kingdom of God does what? In those 2 parables, what does it do?
Yeah.
Exponentially grows. Pretty cool stuff. So even with us imperfect people, the kingdom of God grows. And so
We can look at it as our relationship with God grows
Yeah.
too.
absolutely. It's another great way to frame it.
Walk his
Good
life's
one.
path.
Yeah, good one, Gene. Absolutely. I like that
'Cause
interpretation.
all 3 do deal with the growth. The leaven grows, the mustard seed grows, the tares grow with the wheat.
Yeah. Perfect. I think I'm going to steal that for Sunday. But yeah, so any other stuff about the text for today? Any questions?
It kind of reminds me of, Jesus telling these parables and people not understanding. Yesterday, I went to the telephone office seminar at the Village Hall. I don't think any of you were there.
Oh.
It was as
We
clear as
drove
mud.
away when we saw how crowded it was.
Yeah, I heard the TV is going to be different now. That you can't use
no
it.
cable.
No cable. Yeah.
No. It's not going to be such a big deal if you get your, but you have to have internet to have a TV.
Well, I have that thing in the basement. I mean, they put that,
The fiber.
Oh.
They brought the fiber to your house.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a fiber, but that's not the internet.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's like I
But,
said,
people didn't understand
Yeah.
and were ready to fight back.
Yeah.
I mean, they went with that feeling that they're not really going to learn anything good.
I like that analogy too.
Yeah.
If we hear
And
these
I'm
words
sure
from
that's what-
Jesus,
Yeah.
Are we listening to what Jesus is really telling us?
Yeah.
Even if it's hard stuff for us to understand.
My Bible has got a little explanation that's kind of good. It is widely known that leaven spreads throughout the loaf, but the maturing of the leaven takes time. Hurry the process and you end up with a lump of hard bread that is useless and inedible. Give the leaven time and it produces a wonderful loaf of bread. So it is with the message of the kingdom. Interfere with the process of slow leavening and growth and you end up with a catastrophe. Give the power of God time to work in people and do not expect too much. That's where Don was saying,
Yep.
he brought it out and it had a work in them, and
Yeah.
it grows that way.
Good.
Yeah. Well, that's good to know too. That we need to take as much as it grows. It takes.
It takes time.
Takes
You're not
time.
gonna.
Yep. Takes a day to bake bread at home, I know that.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't do it in the morning, it takes a
Yeah,
day.
It takes a day. You can't rush it, or you do end up with
Yeah.
Can't go anywhere else.
breadsticks.
And like you said before, if you would read this story at a certain time in your life, it might mean something. And you read it later at a different time in your life, it'll be something else.
It'll be something else. As much as we want Jesus to just say, just tell me that one thing you want me to do, and Jesus just says, I'm going to tell you not just right now, but for the whole rest of your life, what you need to do. It's something even more powerful, but I think, Karen, too, I like what you were talking about the last time we met. God gave us a brain. God wants us to use the brain. And I think parables are really much about, yes, you have our basic faith and stuff like that, but God wants us to engage all of our facilities, use our heart, our mind, our soul, to understand God. And I think that's one thing I think a lot of times we don't do as Christians very well, is engage our brain and say, okay, so what is God asking out of us?
I don't think there's a cap or a ceiling on our faith.
No.
It should always be
Yeah.
growing.
Absolutely.
Be open to growth.
The sky's the limit.
Right.
So, well, any other parts about the text? Otherwise, we'll get to prayer. Where are we at next week, besides here?
Matthew 16,
Matthew 16.
Yep.
Is it more teaching?
Transfiguration.
Transfiguration. Oh, yeah, it's that time of year.
Yeah.
So like I said, so as we sort of wrap this up as well too, with just the teachings of Jesus. So it wasn't just the miracles that Jesus did. It wasn't the healings that Jesus did that got people intrigued about who Jesus was and why they wanted to follow him. It was these type of teachings, these ambiguous type of teachings, that made people really think about what they were doing. So just remind that part of yourself too, that there's a lot of wisdom that Jesus gives us. It isn't just about the miracles, but it's even more about, the whole 9 yards. So
I had one other question.
Mhm.
Why did they ask him to explain that one? That's the easiest one of those to
well,
understand.
the other part of that too is I often wonder if Jesus was like, well, I'll explain that one to you.
But they asked him to explain that one.
Sometimes I wonder if Matthew was like, yeah, or Jesus. There's certain ways that you can get people to ask you that particular question. I'm going to make them I'm going to lead to this because I know they're going to ask me about that, and then that way I can do this one. So, but yeah, the other ones I thought would have been a lot more interesting if he answered those. So, well, let me do the outro so thank you for coming to Bible study today. This point in this Bible study, we're going to pray. So please, if you have any prayer requests, please send them to me. Either you can put them in the comment section below. You can send me a text, an email. Just know that we will be praying for you as well too. You take care and have a wonderful day.